is Houston, and you're listening to This is Metal, and this is episode 15, if you can believe it, Joe. And Joe Lawson is with me, my co-host as usual. And Joe, how you doing today?
Doing good.
Yeah, and so Joe, what's going on with you? I mean, I know you've had a lot of downtime, like a lot of musicians this year. Are you working on any new music?
Well, right now everything just seems to be at a screeching halt, kind of, And
End of the year.
That's the situation for a lot of musicians.
Yeah.
A lot of bands, and there's a lot of reluctancy and apprehensive to release albums and what to do or what not to do, and it's difficult to read the forecast of what's going to happen here in the future. So,
and where do you and your
we'll be able to put out the new Scream King record, though? We're looking forward to that in 2021.
I was going to ask you, where do you and your bandmates stand with that? I mean, there's kind of two schools of thought, as you said. There's the one school of thought where people think, well, we shouldn't release anything until after everything goes back to normal. But then again, who knows when that is? And then there's the other school of thought, which is, let's at least get some new music out there for the fans. So kind of where do you stand on that?
Well, my personal stance on that right now, I'd like to just to release it and get it out there, because not as many bands are releasing stuff right now, which is ideal.
Yeah.
Because what's going to happen is there's a lot of bands that are recording 2, 3, 4, 5 records even, and they're going to overflood the market with a shitload of releases.
Yeah.
And in effect, what's going to happen is, like any other business, supply and demand. And so if the supply exceeds the demand, then they're going to release albums for a much smaller fraction of people that are going to be interested. Whether they believe that or not, that's just
the way it is.
Business 101, and it doesn't change for music or musicians.
Yeah, so
that's the way that it is. When 5,000 people put a record out all at one time, people have to make choices. They can't buy them all.
Oh yeah.
So you're limiting your success by doing that. So you got to look into what other bands are doing and how and look at the climate, how things are out there, and use your head a little bit about it. You just can't throw an album out there willy nilly and hope that it does good.
Yeah, I mean, Scream Kings. Let me ask you, Scream Kings, as far as the new album or the next release, is it pretty much in the can, or do you still have some more songs to record for it?
No, it's done. It's finished.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
We're ready to put it out. So it's just a matter of logistics and finances right now.
Yeah.
So
I'm kind of with you on that.
Holidays, and then we'll look at that more seriously
in the new year,
quarter of 2021 for sure.
Well, that's something definitely to look forward to. Now, what we're going to be talking about today, just to let the folks know, is this is going to be the last This Is Metal show for the year, and as I said. Joe, we're wrapping it up for 2020, and hopefully next year will be even better metal-wise. But we're going to be talking about 50 years of Judas Priest, if you can believe that. Now, I'd like to start the show off, Joe, with you tell me, like, obviously you're a Priest fan, but what's your story as far as, what was the album, the song, what was the year when you first got into Priest? Do you remember that?
Well, actually, no, not specifically. As strange as that sounds, because Priest is, if I was forced to pick one band and one band only that has influenced and inspired me the most throughout my journey as a musician, it would be Judas Priest.
Interesting.
Down. I absolutely love them. I think their fist-pumping metal anthems are a staple in my life and a lot of people's lives, and like you said, 50 years, that's a testament. I mean, they've stood the test of time. They've been around that long.
Yeah, and speaking of 50 years,
albums and a phenomenal band. And their songwriting is just, it's always passionate, powerful, dynamic, melodic, and they don't overdo it, in my opinion. It's the perfect balance.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of 50 years, Judas Priest is like 1 year older than I am, just to give you that perspective. But I'm still a very big fan of what they do. And I got to tell people, preparing for this, I went back and I listened to the very first Judas Priest album, Rock-A-Rolla, who that makes for an interesting conversation, because Rock-A-Rolla is one of those albums that people either love it or they hate it. And I listened to it, and the interesting thing about it is... if you listen to this, this is kind of, it gives you an indication of what you could hear the potential in Judas Priest, what they would become. But I mean, that album has almost got some progressive rock music on there. They're not quite...
Their earlier stuff was very different, and even I would even say experimental.
Yeah,
it really was, and it's awesome. It's innocent and it's pure and it's passionate, and I love it just the same. It's their beginnings. It's where they came from. So
yeah.
And I think that some of that stuff, like on Sad Wings of Destiny, and some of that stuff is phenomenal. I still love listening to some of that old stuff.
Yeah, rock and roll though. I go back to that album because I mean, just a few weeks ago I heard this for the first time, and in its entirety. I've heard some of the songs, and some of the songs very much sound very Priest-like. But there's a track on there. The title is escaping me, but it's like a 8 or 9 minute track. It's like there's 3 different portions of the song, and again, you can hear the potential that was in Priest at the time, and from what I understand from reading the Wikipedia is the reason for that is that the bulk of the songs were written by Al Atkins, who predates Rob Halford ever being in the band, and so while Rob Halford very much is the singer on the album, a lot of those tunes were written by Al Atkins, so he's singing some other guys' songs, so that's a big reason that that debut album by Judas Priest, even though Halford is singing on the album, sounds so drastically different from what Priest would become.
Right.
Yeah, and then I got to ask you, like I would say probably if you ask me like my top 3 Priest, I love it all, but like probably my top 3 Priest albums would have to be like maybe Painkiller, the one with Living After British Steel, with Living After Midnight, and probably Screaming for Vengeance. So it's probably my top 3 favorite because they're really that's the Judas Priest that we know and love. That's those 3 albums, kind of the defenders of the faith, if you will. Like you said, Judas Priest is one of those bands. They carry the metal flag so proudly, and they're not ashamed of it.
Right, yeah, those are 3 great picks, man. I don't know if I can narrow it down to 3, man, but Painkiller would definitely be one of them. I would have to say maybe even probably the new record, Firepower.
Yeah.
I'm blown away by that. I love every song on there. And it's a hard one, but I would say Jugulator too, man. I really loved that record. I thought it was fantastic. Again, it was a different, a change for Judas Priest and their lineup, and something different. But to me, it sounded like a natural progression for the band overall.
Yeah.
Where they were at, where they left off with Painkiller. So it seemed to make sense to me.
Yeah, and people go back to episode 5 of This Is Metal. We've talked specifically about Tim Owens and the fact that between Painkiller and Jugulator, which was the first album of Tim Owens, there's like 7 years between albums, and that's the longest the band ever taken between albums. But interestingly enough, it was a different singer, but and there were a portion of the fan base that just wouldn't even give it a listen, just because they were like, we're not going to listen to anything that doesn't have Halford. But for guys like you and me, Joe, that kind of have a more open mind, I was not disappointed. It definitely was not Rob Halford, but it was very much still a metal album, and it wasn't like Judas Priest went pop, because they got a new singer or anything like that. So it was very much still a metal band. Yeah.
Oh yeah. They're in my opinion, they're probably one of, if not the greatest, one of the greatest bands in metal history.
Yeah, and how important do you think that double guitar attack of the original lineup, of KK and Glenn Tipton, where you had that kind of wall of sound, that they kind of really they were one of the first bands to really do that, like have a double guitar tag team like that.
I love it. I think personally, bands that utilize 2 guitar players to that extent, that's where it came from, is Judas Priest. They were the pioneers of that, and I love it. The harmony guitars, the back and forth solos, and all the intricate weaving of melody is just, it makes for a very pleasurable listening experience.
Yeah. And if you ever go on YouTube or you watch any like concert footage, or even if you go and watch any of the older music videos, you would always see like where, the choreography was in the band, as far as like, they had a great stage presence, like, KK and Glenn, they would be going back and forth,
Oh yeah,
waving the guitars and stuff.
They really hammed it up, and yep, they put that on the map, and that was a huge influential thing for a lot of guitar players and a lot of bands. I mean, that's where they got it from. As bands, I can't just say Judas Priest. I got to include Iron Maiden.
Oh, of course.
I mean, absolutely. Major influence on so many guitar players and so many bands, and how they formed their sound is from these guys, from bands like Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, and Black Sabbath. I
mean, those are the original, really. Those are I would say the three original kind of British metal bands, and it's amazing that all three of those bands have really stood the test of time. I mean, you mentioned Iron Maiden, which kind of predates Judas Priest just by a few years. They go all the way back to 1976, and that's of course before they ever had a record deal. But they were really big in England at the time. They were making serious noise on the club scene there in England, and even to this day, Iron Maiden is they're a worldwide success. I mean they just put out a live album. I haven't got it yet, but I've seen clips on the internet and stuff. But like a live album that they recorded a few years back on in Mexico. And so, that's my point right there. They're worldwide. They've been to Mexico, Russia. They've been all over the place, not just, their home country of Europe.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And then, Judas Priest, 50 years strong too. I mean, that kind of says it all, because Judas Priest, like a lot of bands, they've had some ups and downs, but, they've had more ups and downs. I'd probably say maybe the two kind of albums that might kind of stand out that weren't maybe as popular would be. I want to get your opinion on. Did you have much love for the album Turbo?
Well, there was good songs on there. Yeah. I mean, I don't dismiss it.
Yeah.
I don't hate it. I respect it as part of their catalog, and again, that was kind of I don't know how to say it.
Like a nod to the times, I would say. I mean, kind of like...
It reflects the time frame of the band. When they put that record out, what was the soundscape, and, what were other bands doing, and what was musically happening and going on at that time frame was very different than what we listen to or what we hear now. Yeah,
and what's interesting about, you go back to Turbo, this is, what time period we're talking is 1986, and... at the time, MTV was very big. I mean, they even had Judas Priest videos from that album being played on MTV. And probably the main thing that really stood out to a lot of Judas Priest fans was probably where you could kind of say Judas Priest went a little pop. I mean, in the sense that that's the first probably time, and it was really noticeable, where Judas Priest really heavily had keyboards in their music. Judas Priest was one of those bands where you never thought they'd have keyboards, but it for that album and the songs they had, it seemed to work. I mean, I'll admit I like Turbo Lover. There's another song on there, Parental Guidance. It kind of had a little bit more of a poppy commercial hard rock feel to it, but
sure.
For the times, it was cool. I thought,
Yeah. Like I said, it has its place. I mean, everybody's probably got their own opinion about that. Yeah. There's some people that probably hate it and think that it's terrible and whatnot. And there's some people that probably absolutely love it. It's Judas Priest is just one of those bands. I think that's one of the keys to their success, is that they've been able to reach and touch so many people on different levels. They've got a very versatile, wide fan base that's expanded over generation and generation, time and time again. It's timeless, great music. That people can relate to, and that's one thing that Rob Halford, I seen in an interview with him years ago, that he had mentioned about when he writes his lyrics, he tries to think of that. He's aware of that, and he wants people to be able to relate and connect and feel what he's talking about. He's very passionate about that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because going back to 1980, which was a very interesting year for metal, because 1980, in regards to Judas Priest, we had the album British Steel, and then you had AC/DC's Back in Black. and Black Sabbath had their first album of Ronnie James Dio, Heaven and Hell. But going specifically to Judas Priest, that album, British Steel, one of my favorite songs on there is Metal Gods. And it's interesting because from that one track, fans started referring to Rob Halford as the Metal God. And it became a point in the Judas Priest show where, he'd sing the song, and they'd be chanting the Metal God. And that's what the guy became known as. It's just interesting that one song, that's what the guy's now known for, and it became his song about him in a way, and I don't think he even intended for that,
Right.
And then Living After Midnight on that same album, that's another great rock anthem, and that was the point in time where Judas Priest started getting played, especially here in the U.S., all over all over radio. I mean, you'd hear them not just on like metal radio, but you'd hear them on like commercial rock radio. I mean, because like even a song like Living After Midnight, that has kind of it's kind of like a commercial radio hit, and people were just loving Judas Priest at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, and they got other great songs like come to mind, Breaking the Law. Just great anthems, and the thing is, for the most part, I mean, for the most part, Judas Priest is pure metal. Like I said, they've had their little pop moments, but I mean, that's why they had that album, Defenders of Faith. That's what they're known for. We're metal and we're proud of it.
Absolutely. Even when they came out with Jugulator, that was the intent. I read in an interview with them that they wanted to come out with the most, because of the trends of the time. Again, bands like Pearl Jam, Nirvana, and Alice in Chains, and that was really, really breaking strong and big, and hip hop, and metal was just kind of shuffled into the background in a very big way. And when they came out with that record, they wanted to come out basically with a fuck you, unashamed heavy metal album. They said.
And
mission accomplished.
Oh yeah, no doubt. And like I said, at that point there had been a Judas Priest album in 7 years, and I think at that time, Glenn Tipton and KK, they were kind of in charge of Judas Priest at that point, because Halford was no longer in the band, and they wrote, they wrote all those songs. In other words, like again, I think like we previously talked, it was kind of interesting that even though they had a new singer in Tim Owens, perfectly capable of writing songs, they're like, no, Glenn and KK, they write the Judas Priest songs. They are Judas Priest. You're just the kind of singer. You're going to deliver the goods, and that's another thing that Judas Priest became known for. They have this song, another great rock anthem I've always loved, Delivering the Goods. And that's one thing I can pretty much say as a Judas Priest fan. This is one band that they really always deliver the goods. I mean, I'm talking about when they come out with some new music, a new album, you go see the band live. I can also say I've never really been disappointed.
No, me neither. And I've seen him with Halford several times, and I've seen him with Ripper as well. And I was never disappointed. I always was pumped up and inspired and invigorated when I left.
Yeah, and I think and that's an interesting thing because let's be honest. I mean, Rob Halford's the metal god. He's the legendary lead singer of this band, and probably there's a huge portion of a Judas Priest audience that would much rather see Judas Priest with Tim Owens. But I think Tim Owens, like you, Joe, he did a remarkable job because I mean, I had my doubts when it was first announced that Halford was leaving. Like a lot of people, oh my God, who are they going to get to replace Halford? But they got this unknown guy from, they saw the drummer Scott Travis saw him playing a Judas Priest tribute, and he told the other guys in the band, and they went and checked him out. And maybe that's why fans were so accepting. Is he was a Priest fan himself. It wasn't like they got a known guy who was a known entity, and he kind of became a star through the ranks of Judas Priest, if you will. But so that's an interesting thing. He was able to step in those huge shoes that Rob Halford left, and do a decent job of filling in until he came back.
Right. Yeah, I think so too. I agree 100%. I don't know that anybody could have done a better job, and that's I got a lot of respect for Tim. He's a great guy and phenomenal singer, and I think he did an amazing job. And I love everything he did, and I think that maybe even if he would have gotten to have a little bit more creative expression or freedom within the band, that there could have been some more really killer stuff that on top of what we already were privy to, that was released, that it could have been maybe even better, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
And then
he's a good songwriter in his own right, and he's got some great ideas,
And what I think is really cool is, from what I understand, him and Rob have met over the years a few times, and they have a huge mutual respect for one another. I mean, like we said, Tim played in a Judas Priest tribute band previously, and so he already was a Rob Halford fan himself. And I've heard him in interviews say over the years, I pretty much knew, but I was kind of just filling Rob's shoes until he came back. I always kind of in the back of my mind had that thought that he would be coming back. And I've heard Rob recently say, he's been thinking about it. He might like to, when Priest goes back on the road, maybe throw in a ripper tune or two that he did with Judas Priest. That'd be kind of interesting, Yeah,
I just wish they wouldn't have waited this long.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have liked to heard Halford more in his prime do some of the Ripper stuff.
Yeah.
And it would have been cool. I mean, things happen, politics, and different feelings and emotions. From different points of view from people in bands, and it is what it is. But like I said, the legacy of Priest is undeniable, even with the lineup changes that they've went through the years. I mean, not too many bands can say that they've kept an original lineup. That idea is just unreasonable. I mean, most marriages
don't
people
last
have
50
a
years.
difficult time being married to one person. And when I was really young, that's one thing I used to ask my grandfather, because he played guitar in a band, and I asked him one time, "What's it like, Grandpa, being in a band?" And his reply to me was, "It's like being married to 5 different people all at the same time."
Wow.
And years later, I through my own pursuit,
profession,
playing music in bands and stuff, I really figured out what he was talking about was actually true. So it's a lot harder than some people think that it is.
Yeah, and some of the guys in Judas Priest were kind of like really like family. I mean, I don't know if you know this or not, Joe, but I've heard the guys talk about over years that Rob Halford and Ian Hill is actually his brother-in-law. He used to be married to Rob's sister, and he said that's why when he left the band it was very hard, but he didn't talk to the guys for years. They were kind of upset, especially Ian and Hill were very close, and they hadn't talked and stuff, and that's why he said when he went back it was very important, even if he didn't really get back with the guys, that he wanted to be on friendly terms with them. So I think that's kind of another interesting thing that a lot of people may not know, that Ian Hill, the bass player, is actually his brother-in-law, and they got kind of that family connection.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, and that's something that's just a whole other level of loyalty and commitment and pride and everything else. It's through a distant relation. Myself and guitarist Rafael Hernandez of Scream King were related through the grapevine and through the family tree, and that's just a whole nother level of commitment that we work together to accomplish the best that we can possibly put out, and we always try and do everything we can together, and we get together during the holidays and stuff like that. So it's nice to be able to work with people that are in your family to pursue those kind of musical goals and dreams. It's really nice to have that.
Oh yeah, and Judas Priest too. Talking about a band that's been together for 50 years. I mean, they except really if you go back to the first couple albums, like we're saying, especially the first one, Rock-a-Rolla. I mean, they really haven't altered their sound that much. I mean, once they kind of got that metal sound and they found their sound, they kind of stuck with that. And they never altered from it. I'd say probably one album, two, maybe they altered a little way. or it was probably their most kind of different album, was that Nostradamus album. I mean,
Yeah.
it was quite different. It was quite different, but that was like one of those once in a lifetime things. And again, that's one of those albums that fans either love or hate.
Yeah. Again, I don't hate it, but
No.
I'm not a big fan of it.
Yeah.
I listened to it and I thought,
What is this?
on?
Yeah.
I was a little confused myself, and but again, that's that's part of the journey for a musician and for a band, is to experiment, to grow, to learn, to venture off into other areas maybe that they hadn't done before. Because let's face it. I mean, how many times can you play "Living After Midnight"?
Yeah.
There's another thing coming over and over and over again. So you can't blame them for trying different things and experimenting, and sometimes that's how you stumble upon greatness. So sometimes it works and sometimes it don't.
And I think for the most part, the interesting thing about the Judas Priest fan base is, I mean, like we were talking earlier, I mean, Rob Halford is a metal god. He's got that great voice. He's everything you think of metal. But I remember when he first came out, like in the early '90s, about being gay. I mean, I've heard him talk about. He had this initial thought that but it's going to be this backlash. Fans aren't going to really support me. But the interesting thing he found out is they still supported and loved everything he did, and what he did in his personal life. Nobody really cared about. That's his private business.
And that's the way that I look at it. I mean, who he beds down with, that's none of my business, and I really don't care. As long as he's happy and that other person is happy, that's his business. That's his personal life, and what he does as a musician and a songwriter and a singer, I mean, is unreal. It's unbelievable. It's like otherworldly to me. So very inspirational.
Yeah, and I bring that up only because, like I said, we all have our idea of what is metal and what does it mean to be metal. And I'm with you. I don't really care one way or the other. But like like when he first came out, I mean, if you go back in time, you can kind of see he was kind of struggling with his identity. Should he come out or should he not? I mean, I see old video clips where he was kind of wearing some, a little more fluffy kind of clothing, not so metal. But then, see, that's the interesting thing is like all those years, you go back in the 70s, you look at old pictures of Judas Priest, very much we knew more so with Freddie Mercury, that there's always talk about, him being the way he was, but like Judas Priest is interesting because people used to see Rob Halford up on stage whipping things and leather belts and studs, and we're thinking, yeah, man, metal all the way. And then he said, you know what? He said, I would get those things in the London sex shops, and people had no idea that I was really into that. But that's the funny.
Yeah, the S&M stuff, right?
Yeah, but that's the funny thing. Everybody sees that those leathers and studs. Judas Priest is really probably one of the first bands that really had that heavy metal look, with the leather and studs. And he's like, later you hear him talking about it, and like, that's where, I got the idea for that. It wasn't really so much that it was, heavy metal, but okay, that's the way the fans interpreted it. That's very interesting,
Right, exactly. It's just all in the interpretation.
And again, what is?
There's probably a million songs with lyrics or different things that that the songwriter initially was talking about, and fans took it a completely different way, and that's the part of the magic and beauty of being a good songwriter and a good lyricist is if you can write in a way that inspires people, that people can relate to and people can connect with. It's not necessarily important for your personal story or your personal view to get out there as much as it is that people can relate to what you're saying, the passion behind it, the feeling behind it, and are you real with what you're talking about? And that's the essence of what Judas Priest has when they write.
And see, that's why Judas Priest really, that's a great song they have, Defenders of the Faith. That's many people think of Priest as defenders of the metal faith, and what's interesting about that is, I mean, you take a song like Breaking the Law or Living After Midnight, you go see a band live in concert, and they're singing that, and you're singing along right with them, and it really is a battle call. Like it's the band and their audience singing together, coming together for the love of metal. Again, when some of these songs he might have been writing about something else that inspired him, but the audience is right there with them. They're singing along, and it like you said, they're all part of the. We all have this love for metal, and anybody who's a Judas Priest fan knows what I'm talking about. And it's the band and the audience coming together, Yeah,
it's that connection happening live right there.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like I said, to me, Judas Priest will forever be known as the band that put fist-pumping heavy metal anthem. That's to me, that's what they're known for. It's good songwriting, it's catchy choruses, catchy songs, and infectious guitar riffs and pounding drums, and it's just heavy metal on 10.
Yeah, and it's interesting again to go back to the very first album, Rock'n'Rolla, because it is so drastically different. I was reading on the Wikipedia that that album did not when it first was released, did not do all that well, and the band was really starving then. I mean, to the point where some of the band members didn't eat for days and days. And I mean, but again, that's part of it. If you listen to those songs on those early albums, you can hear how that you can hear the hunger in the band. You can hear the potential. You can hear they were giving it their all. And it's great to see that a band started out so like dirt poor and so hungry, and they became the metal legends that they are today.
Right. Yep.
I mean, and they really are one, and that's the thing about a lot of these great British rock bands. They really had that work ethic. I mean, I remember reading where like the first Black Sabbath album was recorded like in 11, days or something like that, and they didn't take like 2 or 3 years to get the whole album. I mean, they got it done in 11 days. I mean, and a lot of those like early Sabbath albums, even classic stuff today, people people just love that stuff. 40 years later, 50 years later, people are still listening to it.
Right. Yeah, they've stood the test of time. I mean, undoubtedly, undeniably, and even through all the band's hardships, like talking about the court battle with backmasking and the craziness that they went through with all of that, and the way the PMRC and certain individuals and certain sectors of society really came down hard on them and tried to put the screws to them,
Yeah, I mean, that was really a test. I kind of forgot about that till you brought it up. But yeah, I mean, there were those two. I forget where they came from, but there were these two Judas Priest fans, and tragically, they were heavily like involved in drugs, and they, and one of them killed himself, and the parents were suing because Judas Priest, of course, their music made their son kill himself, and. I mean, very, very sad, what those people, had to go through losing their son, but it was not the band's fault. And I mean, you hear about a court case like that, and you're like, no way this is even going to, make it to court. I mean, it's going to get thrown out. Just no way.
Yeah, but it's unbelievable, but it happened. And the interesting thing, though, is I think that it was like a catalyst for the Painkiller album.
Oh yeah.
They went through being crucified and having to defend the faith, so to speak.
I mean, really, that is, they really they were put on trial. They were put to the test, and they defended the faith, like you said, the heavy metal faith. And
they came out with the epic Painkiller album that will forever be remembered as many metalheads' favorite Judas Priest album.
Yeah, and I've heard many people talk about the fact that the band became a little tighter as and because back then too the trial took place. It was way before Halford left the band, so Judas Priest was still very much a band that was intact as far as the classic lineup there, and they went through it together, but. Halper said, man, they're accusing us of, encouraging our
trying
fans
to kill off the fans. Yeah. Why would a successful band want to kill off the people that are buying their records? I mean, it's just asinine. The whole idea of it's unbelievable.
I mean, and again, you feel for these parents that lost their son, but it's not the band's fault. I mean, maybe the fact that your son is a drug addict. I'm sorry, but maybe that had something to do with it. His altered state.
Yeah, right. The kid was a troubled teen that in need of some help, and nobody saw the signs. And unfortunately, it's unfortunate that something like that happens. To anyone. But to blame a movie or a band or a musician is ridiculous.
Yeah, because again, like.
You want to blame anybody? Blame the parents. Where were you at?
Yeah.
Why didn't you get your son or daughter help?
Yeah.
What did you do to make their life easier or better? How did you try and help improve the situation?
See, again, I think that's part of the issue is, we don't want to, you're trying to find somebody else to blame. Very much like, I'm sure you remember, Joe, in the early '80s, another big metal myth was that the Ozzy Osbourne song "Suicide Solution," he'd been sued several times by parents that their kid committed suicide or something like that, and very much no. Actually, the song was written about. I don't think too many people know that Ozzy was apparently friends with Bon Scott from AC/DC, and his death obviously affected him, and he was like, that's Bon Scott kind of killed himself, being an alcoholic, drank himself to death. That's the suicide solution. But see, people again misinterpreting music and what it means. A lot of people see that song title or the lyric "suicide solution." Okay, you're telling people to kill themselves. Again, open your ears, maybe put on the song before you just assume.
Yeah, exactly.
Do a little research, and it's kind of interesting because then you bring up the PMRC. And a lot of, I think Judas Priest was one of those bands that was on the Filthy 15 or whatever it was, a list that these senators' wives made of like bands that were dangerous and that should not be listened to, and they wanted to sticker all these albums. I think even, it wasn't even necessarily just metal music. I remember Prince was on the list too, and if you can believe that. But a lot of those albums that were stickered or the PMRC was trying to censor, a lot of these bands, it made them more popular.
Yeah, right.
And it's kind of had the adverse. And then the interesting thing, too, about Judas Priest is when you hear the name Judas Priest, probably we think of Rob Halford. He's the metal god. K.K. Downing, Glenn Tipton, the double guitar attack team. Ian Hill, that's been the one guy there probably since day one. He's kind of the bass player. He's kind of a forgotten man, but he's been the one guy that's been there for all 50 years.
Wow, yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy to think that it's been that long.
Yeah, and the drummers, what's interesting is they've had a couple drummers in the band. Probably, I think the guy that's been in the band the longest featured drummer they've had is the guy that's in the band now, Scott Travis, who previously played with Racer X, and he was also he also was in Fight with Rob Halford, so he's done some stuff outside of Judas Priest, but Priest has really kind of become his home, and I think he seems to have fit the band like a glove. It's kind of interesting because when I first got into Priest, the drummer was Dave Holland, and he's sadly no longer with us. He died a number of years ago, but after he left Priest, which was I think after the Ram It Down album, he got into some trouble where he was he went to jail for a number of years supposedly for having sex with an underage kid, and he was kind of one of the members of Priest that kind of never got brought up too much, or he was kind of they just forgot about him, and you could kind of see why they would want to,
Yeah, well, of course, absolutely.
Yeah.
And not only that, you get a drummer like Scott Travis, you never look back.
Yeah.
I mean, why would you?
And see, but
phenomenal drummer, man.
I would still say Scott Travis is a much better drummer than the previous drummer he replaced, Dave Holland, that I was mentioning. But it's kind of sad because Dave Holland was a decent drummer, but and he's dead now, and that's what he's remembered for,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but on a brighter note, Priest was supposed to go on a 2020 tour celebrating the 50 heavy metal years in Europe and North America, but of course, due to the pandemic, it got pushed back to 2021.
Yeah,
and February they started working on a new album.
Wow.
Tipton and Halford did, getting together, doing some songwriting. And Halford made a comment that Andy Sneap and Tom Malone, who produced the Firepower record, will return to contribute to the production of this new record as well.
Interesting.
That was a dynamite team, and they're going to stick with that. And they said that the songs were, there's already fragments and rough drafts of the songs, but they're incomplete. And they're working on them. And Halford said that Tipton also contributed to the songwriting, even with his Parkinson's and stuff. He was still able to contribute some ideas and some stuff for this record. So that's awesome that they're going to, in some shape, way, or form, they're going to keep Glenn Tipton in part of this one as well, which I was shocked to find that out.
Yeah.
And Halford described the songs as being monsters. He said they're, even in their primitive stage, they're really, really good songs. And he said that they would capture the emotion of what we're going through together as a band. Interesting,
because speaking of Glenn Tipton, he's apparently been battling with Parkinson's disease for like the last 10 or 12 years, and he was only kind of forced to reveal it when the Firepower album came out a couple years ago, and of course he wasn't able to tour with the band like he had before. That's why they got this guy Andy Sneap in there now, kind of filling in for him on the road, and from time to time he would make a guest appearance, like show up at a show when they were playing England or somewhere, and he'd pop up on stage for like a song or two. But I really dig the fact that he's still involved, and I dig the fact that he kind of spoke out about his Parkinson's disease, and from what I understand he did too, because he didn't want to just kind of leave Judas Priest and kind of leave fans wondering why he's no longer up on stage with the band, and he wanted to be involved as much as he could. But I guess the disease is affecting him so much at a point where he's not able to go on stage and do a 2-hour show, and I guess it really does affect his playing, and he'd rather be remembered for playing the way he once did than the way he does now. And he says, if I'm able to maybe pop up on stage and play a song, that's fine, but I'm just not able to do it for a whole 2 hours,
Right, yeah, and kudos to him for doing that, wanting to keep his respect and integrity intact and all of those things, and that's got to be really, really hard for him, and I feel for him, and I think that's great that the band is still
supporting him,
tight with him and working with him, and that's real good news to me to hear that, so. And
you still got that classic, part of the classic lineup as far as the songwriting goes.
Yeah.
And now let me ask you, are you much of a fan of Richie Faulkner? He's their guitar player, filled in, he replaced KK Downing.
I'm a huge fan of him, yeah. I mean, the Firepower album is partly due to him. I mean, he helped write it. He co-wrote some of the stuff. I mean, he's an amazing guitarist, and I think he fits like a glove.
Yeah, it's interesting because
there's no disrespect to KK or Glenn, but I think they found a very suitable
replacement
guy for the part, and he does a phenomenal job. I love the way he plays, and I think he's a great guitar player. Something interesting I want to go back to Glenn Tipton was in an interview they had talked with Andy Sneap about joining Judas Priest, and he quickly corrected them and said that he is not a member of the band. Yeah. He's just filling in, helping them. He is first and foremost a producer. That's his job, and he's just helping Judas Priest out, filling in, for their tour, their live dates, and whatever he has to do. So when this all came about, George Lynch made a comment that he's always loved Judas Priest and he wishes they would give him a shot. Could you imagine that, George Lynch?
Wow, yeah.
I could totally see George Lynch playing with Priest, and I think a lot of fans would also love to see that. Yeah. So if anybody in the Priest camp ends up listening to this episode, duly note that and give old George a phone call, because he would be a phenomenal replacement if that comes to be what has to happen for Judas Priest in the future.
And there was once a time, Joe, where you just wouldn't even think about having a bloody American in the ranks of Judas Priest, but I mean they've done it, like we said, but they've done it with Tim Owens, they did it with Scott Travis. So if you get a guy like George Lynch, you could definitely it's just a matter of getting the right guy, and George Lynch I definitely would think that would be.
He would tear it up.
He'd tear it up. Yeah.
He would tear it up.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Like we could always talk about Priest for hours and hours, but I got to tell you, I want to get your opinion. Like when Rob Halford did leave the band for a while, and he like when you first heard the band Fight, were you a big fan of that, or what were your thoughts on?
Fuck yeah! I loved Fight. Absolutely loved them. Yeah, killer band, man. How could you not?
Yeah.
Something's wrong with you if you didn't like them.
Yeah, I mean, see, the thing is, like, I remember when Fight first. I gotta tell you, like a lot of people, I love that debut album. I mean, it was kind of a different sound. It was kind of like Priest, kind of maybe meets Nine Inch Nails, but you kind of had a more industrial sound. But for what it was, and then you had Scott Travis with him on the drums. That was cool, and then people probably are not even aware of it. The guitar player Russ Parrish, that's the guy known as Satchel now in Steel Panther. So I mean, you had all these great players, in that band.
Oh yeah. It was phenomenal lineup of musicians and killer material, man. Absolutely. It was, they did the drop tuning thing, and it was Halford experimenting with a new sound, a new idea, new concepts, and I think that's important as a singer, as a songwriter, that you're able to do that, in some context or another, and I'm grateful for those Fight albums. And the second album I like equally, so Small Deadly Space.
Yeah.
There's some killer material on that too, man.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting that like you said, Scott Travis played on those early Fight records, but then he decided to stick with Priest, and so he's been like a loyal Priest soldier himself since he's going all his debut with the band was Painkiller, and I think each album he's done with the band, he's just gotten better and better. It's like he's been there from day one, and then one of the earlier drummers, Les Binks, from what I understand, he's going to be the featured drummer on Tim Owens Tim Owens and KK Downey. It's called KK's Priest, and I guess that's going to be released sometime in 2021. So I'm interested to hear that because you almost got like 3 generations of Priest. You got KK and you got Les Binks going back to the classic Priest days, and then you got Tim Owens.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting to see and hear. And again, I'm all for KK, a big KK fan, and big Tim Owens fan, and Les Binks is duly notable, respectfully, for a lot of the classic Priest material, of course. So I think that's going to be potentially a dynamite combination, and I'm looking forward to hearing what they do, what they come out with, and what they play. And hopefully 2021 will be a much better year, and everybody will be able to go back to playing and seeing live concerts happen again. I'm looking forward to that. That would be fantastic, Yeah,
and just to bring up KK Downing for a minute, I don't know if you're aware of this, Joe, but I recently interviewed Ross the Boss from Death Dealer, and he previously played in Manowar, and he was telling me that I think this is going back like maybe a year or two ago, but the KK Downing, the first time he got up on stage, like after leaving Judas Priest, was a couple years ago, and
Ross got to play with him.
Yeah, and just think about that. Could you imagine you're the first guy that he gets up on stage with after 10 years of not being on stage?
Well, Ross is no small name himself.
No.
He's been in the business a long time, and a phenomenal songwriter and guitar player, and great guy, great person, and so that's not too surprising to me because, like I said, knowing a little bit about Ross and his music and what he's accomplished. I mean, I can see that's a reasonable connection there, and that would be awesome if KK in some fashion or form decided to bring Ross into KK's Priest. That would be awesome. Them two together. Could you imagine?
Hey, that what a even if just to write a tune or two, but I mean, what a collaboration that would be. Yeah. That
would be awesome. Manowar and Priest.
Yeah.
I mean, wow.
And then I'd like to get your thoughts on this. Probably like I said, right off the top of my head, Tim Owens. I mean, he seemed to be the perfect replacement for Halford. There's only probably one other guy that I could think off the top of my head maybe could have done it. I'd like to get your thoughts on our mutual friend. Sean Peck, he always reminded me of having like a Halford-like vocal style.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Sean would have stepped up to it. I mean, I'm sure he would. They wouldn't have to ask him twice.
Yeah.
And the other thought that I had was Ralph Sheepers.
Maybe. Yeah.
Primal Fear.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah.
But and I think that some of those other people. I know Ralph was actually a consideration.
Mm-hmm.
I know that, and there was a few other guys that they were considering. So Tim wasn't the only person in consideration for that. Obviously, it just worked out the way that it worked out. But I mean, it would have been cool to see a lot of those different scenarios play out. But I'm grateful that they did stick with Tim, because I think Tim's got a great voice, and it's more of a natural voice. He doesn't sing falsetto. His voice is true and intense in the octave. He sings in the mask, which is called placing the tone, singing in your face. He's using his diaphragm. He's doing it right, and that's the power that he has. He's a very, very powerful singer.
So let me ask you, Joe, when you when you got ready for a show, have you ever done a sound check and maybe belted out a Priest tune or two?
Oh yeah, just goofing around.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, what are some of the songs that you kind of love to do?
Victim of Changes is one that I would do frequently.
Oh, okay, interesting. And then I got to ask you, we talked a little bit about Tim Owens, because he's actually got a place in Priest history in the last 50 years.
Yeah.
So, did you ever see that movie? It was a Mark Wahlberg movie called Rockstar. It was supposedly based on his story joining the band, but then they took it a little too far, and he distanced himself from saying, "No, that's not really how it happened."
Yeah. I mean, a lot of things you hear about, through the Chinese telephone, so to speak, you got to kind of take it with a grain of salt. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's difficult to put any stake in some of the crap that you hear. Sometimes it's like, what?
Yeah.
But you never know, I guess, right?
Yeah, you never know. And then I want to bring up, because obviously one of the things he did besides fight was where he really he did that album with Two. It was kind of I don't know, he'd call it but it was very, very different. Didn't sound too metal. A lot of people were kind of turned off, and then he went back to more of a metal sound with the Halford band. But I think why he ultimately went back to Priest, because a lot of fans did, including myself, love that Halford band. But let's be honest, it sounded a lot like Judas Priest. So if you get to call to return to Priest, why would you not do that?
Well, there was a lot of history there, family connection there.
Yeah.
He spent a lot of his life, a lot of his happiest memories in his entire music career revolved around Judas Priest. So that's very difficult to walk away from something that was such a big part of your life. So I can kind of see that, and I love the Halford band. I thought that they were phenomenal. I think that was a great band, great lineup, and killer music that he put out with them. Again, I loved it. Yeah, the two record. In all due respect, it is what it is, and it's a unique piece of music and art. But I wasn't a fan of it.
Yeah.
I got too much metal in my blood.
I hear you. And
if I were to do anything else music-wise, it'd be like maybe classic rock or a blues record when I get like 70. I don't know, but I just couldn't imagine doing something so removed. But then again, that's the individual. Halford's his own unique individual, his own unique person, and that was something that he wanted to do, and he did it. So, but I just couldn't see myself doing something like that.
Yeah. And before we wrap this up, Joe, tonight, I got to once again give a shout out to our mutual friend Sean Peck, for the simple fact that while we're on the subject of the band Halford, had it not been for that debut Halford release, where he had done a duet with Bruce Dickinson called "The One You Love to Hate," that is where the idea initially came up for the Three Tremors. The Three Tremors was originally a band that they were going to put together. They thought, what would happen if we got, if we got like Jeff Tate from Queensryche, Rob Halford from Judas Priest, and Bruce Dickinson from Iron Maiden. These guys that were all known for reaching those high, heavy metal notes. Like have them do an album together. They call it the Three Trimmers. I don't exactly know who, but Sean said, I heard about this like a lot of people, and he's like, years and like 15 years went by, nobody ever did anything with it. So I thought, hey, that'd be a great idea, and that's where he got his idea to do the Three Trimmers with, oddly enough, Tim Owens. So again, thank you, Rob Halford. It all kind of goes back to Judas Priest.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm sure if you ask Sean, he's a huge Priest fan himself.
Oh yeah. In fact, he told me that when Tim Owens first joined Priest, that's where him and Tim first met. Is that Cage was opening band on that tour.
Right.
Yeah. So again, it all comes back to Judas Priest, and why wouldn't? And I understand that too. Maybe when they get their 50th anniversary tour, hopefully going next year, there's supposed to also be like a 50th anniversary book coming out on the last 50 years of Judas Priest. So I'd be interested to see what's in that.
Yeah, you know what? Speaking of that, I can't remember the title right offhand.
Yeah.
But Halford came out with a book.
Oh, I think it's called I Confess. And
yeah, that sounds Confession.
Confession. Yeah. In fact, one of the things he talks about, I haven't got the book myself, but I've heard him do interviews on the book and talk about some of the stuff that's in the book. I still very much want to get the book. But anyways, one of the things is he said when, that he knew he was, gay for several years, but he kind of kept it, hidden from other guys and a lot of people he knew. But he said, like, very early on when Judas Priest was opening band on a tour with Iron Maiden, going all the way back, I guess, to like around 1980 when Paul Di'Anno was still the singer in Iron Maiden. He's like, I thought he was kind of cute, and I came on to him.
Wow.
Yeah. Again, he's a little more open, but see, that's the cool thing is that you could be the metal god and have no shame in being who you are, and that's part of the reason for the book title Confession is he kind of opens up about his struggle and all this stuff that he dealt with for years, and kind of like. I came out and people were very accepting, and I remember so much to the point that around the time of the Fight album and that when he was first coming out, he got to be the Grand Marshal of some gay parade somewhere. But you couldn't even imagine the metal god doing that. But again, I just love the fact that the fans were so accepting of him.
Yeah, and rightfully so. They should be.
Yeah.
It's one thing if he's shoving it down your throat,
No.
And he's not like that,
No.
So I respect him for that. His personal life is his personal life,
Yeah.
and I think to some degree he prefers it that way too, and that way people still can maintain their admiration and love and respect for what he does with Judas Priest and his other musical endeavors.
Yeah, and and the final thing I want to get your opinion on tonight, Joe, before we wrap it up is, you're talking a little bit about the last album they did, Firepower, and I think part of the reason that album was so strong, again, going back to Jugulator when Tim Owens first joined the band, there was initially that thought, okay, well, they got a new singer, so he's going to play a role in the songwriting, and KK and Glenn were a little too protective of letting anybody else take part in the writing, but I think, you got KK and Glenn are no longer really, Glenn's kind of, in a mobile way, he's still part of the Judas Priest writing team, so that's good, but I think, you got Halford, he's kind of one of the last original guys in the band, along with Ian Hill, and he's like, okay, we got this new guy, Richie Faulkner. He's a great guitar player, so let's let him get involved in the writing. Let's let Glenn still be involved, and so you got 2/3 of a original Priest writing team, and I think it's cool that they let the other guy, Richie, kind of take part, because then he really gets to do like what Tim Owens didn't get to do, and he gets to kind of bring in his influence into the band.
Well, let's put it this way. Halford made a comment about Richie Faulkner when he brought his ideas and his guitar playing and what he could offer as a member of Priest. And when Halford heard it, he made the comment that Richie Faulkner relit a fire in him.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So that's saying something pretty big.
Yeah, and Richie Faulkner.
If you're inspiring the metal god, you're on the right track. I'd say at the bare minimum.
I mean, and Richie Faulkner, he's not just some guy off the street. I mean, he played with, I think her name is Lauren Harris, Steve Harris's daughter from Iron Maiden, in her solo band. I think before he was in Priest. So he's kind of done his dues, and he's I think Priest is the next logical place for him.
He was also in a band called Dirty Looks or something like that too.
Wow. Okay.
Kind of an underground rock band of sorts or whatever, but look into that one if you're curious. But
okay.
I think he was also in a band called Dirty Looks.
Okay, wow. I think I've heard of that band, but they're kind of like a little under the radar. And then Andy Sneap, we were talking a little bit about. He really is known as a producer, and one of the other bands he produced last couple of years is Accept. So I hear Accept's coming out with a new album. So I'll be excited to hear that when it comes out.
Yeah, absolutely. The guy is a phenomenal producer. I mean, if money was no concern, that's probably one of the top 3 guys that I would want to produce, have produce a record for me. Would be Andy Sneap. I mean, phenomenal producer. And
I will say this about Andy Sneap: it's kind of cool that like you're saying, he knows his place as far as like, no, I'm not Glenn Tipton's replacement. I'm just going on the road with the band since he's unable to do it.
He's filling in.
I'm filling in.
That's all, and that's all they wanted to do. He's not looking. He didn't. He wasn't looking to join a band or Judas Priest.
But what if you could get a gig like that, Joe? I mean, that's the ultimate gig. It's almost like the guy that replaced Richie Sambora in Bon Jovi. Everybody wants Richie Sambora to come back, but and he's not maybe getting what Richie Sambora was because he's not an original member, but it's a pretty decent gig if you know what I mean. People know who you are. You're getting pretty decent paycheck.
Sure. I mean, the other thing it does is it puts you on the map.
Yeah.
And really launches you a career. A lot of those guys.
Yeah. And just talking about
Tim Owens and Todd Latour and a lot of these guys. They're not taking anything away from them. They're very, very talented. And they work very hard.
Yeah.
But if they hadn't got the break that they got in bands like Queensryche and Judas Priest, we might not ever even heard of their name.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this much, Joe, as far as Todd Latour, we're going to have to, early next year when we get going again, we're going to have to do an episode on him because I'm not sure if you're aware, but he has a new solo album coming out on Rat Pack Records.
Yeah, and it's smoking good.
And I can't wait to hear it in its entirety, but that'll be something to kind of talk about. I'd like to see what he really does outside of Queensryche. Of course, we know he did Crimson Glory before, but when you do a solo album, this is his chance to kind of do what he can't maybe in Queensryche, because he'll have total freedom to do what he wants, and that'd be kind of interesting to see what he does with it.
Yeah. I posted one of the songs on my Facebook page.
Oh, okay.
So if you go on my Facebook page, look at the link there on YouTube, click it, check it out. It's a smoking metal tune.
Yeah.
I mean, heavy. I mean, it doesn't sound like Queensryche at all.
Yeah, and we were talking a little bit about Phil X. He's a guitar player that stepped in for Richie Sambora, and I'm going to end on this because it's kind of an interesting story. I interviewed him earlier this year for his solo album that was coming out, and he was telling me, he's played with a lot of people besides Bon Jovi. I mean, one of the first things he became known for was he was the guy who replaced Rick Emmett in Triumph, if you can believe that.
Wow.
He was a lead singer and guitar player for a while in Triumph, which is a legendary Canadian band. And I just tell people like, Rush and Triumph were like the big 2 rock bands come out of Canada. Rush was a little bigger, but in the 80s, Triumph was just about as big. And if you go back and you get their Greatest Hits album, came out like maybe 10 years ago now, you'll be reminded, oh yeah, Triumph. They put out all those great songs. Oh, I forgot about that. In fact, that was kind of my story with them. And then Phil X, again, the guitar player we're talking about, he told me that he goes, I played on Alice Cooper's Brutal Planet album, and I remember getting that album, and I'm a huge Alice Cooper fan, and thinking at the time, man, this is really metal for Alice Cooper. And he says, what I was doing on that album is, he says, I was doing these guitar loops, and that's why that album sounds that way. And Alice just really loved what I was doing on that album. So, I mean, it's kind of interesting, but a lot of Alice Cooper fans years later love that Brutal Planet album because it is such a metal album for Alice Cooper.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Well,
Good stuff.
Joe, I can't believe it's been over an hour now that we've been doing this. I have so much time talking about the last 50 years.
I could talk about Judas Priest for another 4 hours.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to do another another hour. But in any event, before we wrap it up, anything else you can think that you'd like to bring up before we wrap it up?
I think we covered quite a bit, man.
Yeah.
It's off the beaten track a little bit, but check out the new AC/DC album too. Power Up. What a kick-ass rock record.
Oh yeah,
wow. I mean, I went on and listened to 4 or 5 tracks of it, and man, I was pleasantly surprised. I mean,
in fact,
it's strong stuff. It's probably one of their better records in a long time.
In fact, Joe, I'm glad you brought that up because we will end on this note, which is definitely early next year. I would like to do an episode about AC/DC and the new album, because it is such.
Yeah, I'm game.
It's such a great story. I mean, first of all, if you go back just 2 years ago, everybody really thought AC/DC was dead as far as the band was over. Brian Johnson had lost his hearing. He's back now, better than ever. Cliff Williams, the bass player, came back. They all came back to do one more album, and it's great. I dare say, because I love everything AC/DC, but I dare say this has got to be, to my ears, the best thing they've done since Back in Black, and that's saying something.
Yeah, it is.
And it's amazing because Malcolm Young is not featured on the album. Obviously, he's no longer there. I'd originally heard the idea was that they had all these great guitar riffs that he left behind, and so they thought, we're going to put these riffs together and we'll do like one more album with Malcolm. But then the guy who's in the band now, Stevie Young, he's the nephew of Angus and Malcolm, and I guess Angus thought, well, he's a guitar player in the band now, we'll just let him kind of play the guitar part. I guess part of it was he thought it'd be kind of weird, Malcolm not here, and to hear his guitar part, on the album. So well, let's Stevie do it. But the interesting thing is, even though he does not play a lick on the album, you can still feel his presence on the album because he was involved in writing all those riffs, and you can just hear his influence coming out.
Yeah. Yep. Good stuff, man.
Yeah. And then I just got to say, probably my favorite track, one of my favorite tracks on the album is called Through the Mist of Time. That's just a great kind of AC/DC tune to me.
Yeah, phenomenal. Save some of the good stuff, the juicy stuff for the AC/DC episode.
Yeah, so we will do that. Just kind of want to wrap it up for the year, and but you're definitely right about that because how great to have an album and it hits #1 first week.
Yeah, I'll probably never know, but I can imagine it's got to be a pretty awesome feeling.
Yeah. Well, Joe, if I don't not talk to you before, you have a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, and we'll be catching up after the first of the year.
You too, my friend, and I just want to give a shout out to all the people tuning in and listening to our episodes. We appreciate it, and it means a lot to us. And give this one a try and listen, and we'll be putting a lot more out throughout 2021.
So, Joe, why don't we end on this with you? Since I'm always opening the show. Let's hear you say, "This is metal."
All right. You're listening to This Is Metal.
There you go. I love that. Okay. My metal friend, my metal god, Joe, we'll be talking again after the first of the year. Take care, my friend.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.